I mean, where do we even start? Another bombshell report from The Athletic detailing the Jets and Woody Johnson's dysfunction yet again. The Jets interview another general manager candidate in the name of Jim Nagy. A lot to talk about in Jetland, and we'll get to it all here on a Friday evening edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Our guest is Jets X Factor's very own Michael Nania. Appreciate you guys sticking with us and all the support, so let's roll.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Cimini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer, and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Hello everyone, and welcome in to another episode of NY Flight Jets Talk. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate you guys sticking with us. Make sure you smash that like button and you are subscribed to the channel. A lot to get into today in Jetland. Some more news that broke is, former, Jets hater, Jets critic Colin Cowherd. He did say he spoke to Mike Vrabel, and Mike Vrabel said he would, what we heard earlier on just a few weeks ago, that he'd be okay to accept the job if he approved the GM hire. So we'll touch on that and much more all here on NY Flight Jets Talk. But let's bring on our guest for today's show, the great Michael Nania of Jets X Factors, joining us. Nania, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, a few weeks ago when the Jets started, going off the rails, I thought this was going to be a slow roll to the finish line. We'd be pretty bored here, just counting down the days until the real season started, which is the off season for the Jets. But they've managed to make this a very entertaining stretch run here.
Yeah, entertaining to say the very least here. And Michael, last time we spoke, I was in London, and it was, right ahead of the Jets Week 5 game, and little did we know that was going to be the downfall of the season. We were coming off a rough 10-9 loss in Denver, but boom, I know you were at that game, but boom, little did we know that was going to be the beginning of the end for the Jets and their season. Obviously, Robert Saleh fired shortly after that game. So I guess where I'm going to start is the Athletic report that dropped pretty recently, detailing, Woody Johnson potentially using Madden ratings to, avoid a potential trade for Jerry Jeudy. A lot in there. We've seen a lot of this from the Athletic, some that I believe, some that I do not. What are your overall thoughts on the report, and what are some of the main points you really thought you wanted to, capitalize on, and some that you thought were factual that need to be changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think with this report, as with most things, the truth lies in the middle somewhere. I don't think it's necessarily another opportunity to, act like Woody Johnson will forever hold the Jets back from being successful. There's no way they could be successful under him. I don't think it's quite to that extent, but at the same time, you do have to acknowledge that this stuff doesn't happen with most organizations.
Yes.
However true or untrue it may be, it just doesn't happen with most teams around the league, this extent of leaks and these types of accusations. So it is a negative for sure, and it is something you have to work around, and that could be an obstacle. And then in regards to the other aspect of it, in terms of the Athletic and how they have covered the Jets this year, again, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I definitely think there are there's some embellishment going on here in terms of just exaggerating some of the aspects of the story. I mean, Costello came out and already kind of downplayed the Madden part of it. Like, yes, he brings it up, which is definitely a concern, but it also didn't nix the trade necessarily. But, at the same time, I think, if these are what sources are telling them and you have this story in your hand, it's kind of their job to put it out there. So, are there biases? Probably, but, it makes sense that, the Jets fired a lot of people. There are a lot of bitter ex-employees out there who are, looking to not only get back at the Jets, but, in exchange for giving that information, now some of these reporters could put their names in good light as they move on and look for new jobs. So there's a lot of moving parts at play here. But I think with all aspects of it, whether you're looking at Woody, whether you're looking at the Athletic, there are definitely criticisms to be had, but on both ends, I think I fall in the middle. Like, I don't look at this as, a total hit job. Like, there are some legitimate things that I think you have to take into account there. But at the same time, there definitely do seem to be biases at play here and some exaggerations.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. I think another thing I want to say is I don't think, whatever it is, Brick Johnson and the Jack Johnson, I think is the other kid's name. I don't think they should be in the locker room. I don't think they should really, the whole Brick Johnson thing having, being involved in potential, personnel decisions, major personnel decisions at that. I think that needs to stop. So there were some alarming things. The Mike White thing from back in 2022, Woody Johnson telling him he effing sucks after he was playing with several broken ribs. I mean, you can't have that. So there's no problem. Not no problem. I mean, there's a problem that this team is dysfunctional, and we've seen it. This team, longest active drought among North American sports, 14 years now with no playoffs. So I think all these reports from The Athletic, I agree. The truth lies somewhere in the middle, but I'm going to move on, Michael. And the Jets interviewed another GM candidate yesterday, and it's an executive director of Reese's Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy. 15-year career as an NFL scout before moving over to the Senior Bowl in 2018. Thoughts on the interview? Do you like Nagy? Do you not? I'm personally not a fan of him, just given he's been out of the NFL for a little while, and other than being a scout, he doesn't have much front office experience.
Yeah, I think the most interesting part of this interview, and collectively the 4 rumored ones that we've heard so far, 3 of them completed, and then Riddick hasn't officially come in yet. But the interesting theme, and Kyle Newman wrote an article about this for us at Jets X Factor, is 3 of these guys have ties to the 33rd team. And of those, Nagy definitely is the strongest tie because he is a contributor for that site. He writes articles for them pretty frequently. He's written a few this season. And leading up to the previous Senior Bowl, he wrote a bunch of articles kind of promoting Senior Bowl prospects. So that's an interesting trend here with some of these early candidates. It could be nothing because you can't interview most of the top candidates yet, being that the season is still going on. You're gonna have to wait a few weeks for the season to wrap up for a lot of these guys. So it could just be they're using their connections to get some early interviews in, get the ball rolling. It could be that, or it could also be a little bit of an alarming indicator that they are leaning towards the search party, the 33rd team with Tannenbaum and Spielman, that they are leaning towards, some of their connections and making this a little bit of a closed circle search. But it's early and we have to wait and see. They might hire they probably won't hire any of these guys, given how many interviews they'll probably do when it's all said and done. So it's very early. I wouldn't read into it too much, but it's definitely something to note here that they have leaned pretty strongly towards candidates that have ties to the 33rd team organization. And with Nagy, he's probably the strongest example of that. Like I said, it's probably just, a guy that they know, they're just putting his name out there. Maybe he's interested in getting back into the league in some capacity at some point. And they just want to, put this on his resume that he interviewed because, hasn't been in the league for, I think, 6 years since he was a scout with the Seahawks. And I don't think he should be completely written off because, he does have so many connections in that role, like the number of coaching staffs that work that event every year, scouts that run through there. The connections in that aspect of it is definitely there, but just given how long he's been out of the league, and even when he was in the league, it wasn't very high ranking. I don't think he's a serious candidate, but those are some interesting trends that I think are worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, I remember reading Kyle's article earlier today, and I think someone in the executive's name was Joe Barner, was it? Who?
Yeah.
He has a direct connection to Riddick and Dimitrov.
Yeah, Joe Banner.
Yeah, Joe Banner is his name. Direct connection to Thomas Dimitrov and Louis Riddick. Dimitrov is a name I want to get into here, Michael, because he's someone I find as a top candidate. And when it comes to an experience standpoint and, a proven track record, I don't think you're going to get much more of that with, out there other than Dimitrov, really. His record with the Falcons, well, first off, he spent, a long time as the Falcons general manager, inheriting a 4-12 team in 2007, then turning them to 11-5 team in 2008. So he was able to, turn teams into winners quickly. He was dismissed after the 2020 season, but he's drafted. I think I have 11 Pro Bowlers here, and then finding success on day 3 of the draft, which I think is a big thing and that I'm going to look for in the candidates. Ton of success on the trade market, signing free agents. We get his exact record up here. His record was 113-95 was his record with the Falcons. So I think he's a compelling candidate. What are your thoughts on him? And do you think the Jets really need to look much further than him? Obviously, they're going to vet other candidates, but do you think Dimitroff has the potential to be the guy? And if not, who are some other names to keep an eye out for? And what are some of the intangibles you're really looking for in these guys?
Yeah, he's definitely an interesting candidate because I think, I do believe with these hires that the Jets are going to make, they're going to, as best as they can, try to strike a balance between, being forward thinking, but also having guys who are experienced and have done it. Because you said it, 14-year playoff drought. That's your entire life, most of your life. So it's a long time. So
entire life, yeah.
And I don't think the Jets are a rebuild team. They're going to retool. They have significant changes that need to be made, but there's still a lot of talent on this roster, and they can be in the wild card mix next year. Super Bowl, maybe got to wait a couple years, see how they could, retool some of these significant roles. But there's talent on this team. They're not tearing it down. So considering that, I don't think they're going to necessarily go for the hot shot coordinator who was the quarterback's coach with the Rams. I'm just making things up. Particular names here, but you know what I mean? I don't think they're necessarily in that position where they're going to take high ceiling shots that they can be patient with. I think they are going to consider experience and try to lean towards guys who've done that because they want to get this thing over with and start to get this team's reputation back to a stable point and build off of that. So having said all that, I do think guys in terms of the GM search, like Dimitroff, are going to have a level up compared to some of these other candidates because they have a track record of success that you could fall back on. You could say, this guy has done it. We know he can do it. And like you said, he took a team it's not like he inherited talent with the Falcons, 4-12. They missed the playoffs 3 years in a row before he was there. So yeah, they were in a bad situation and he comes in, instant success, and they were a pretty consistent NFC contender for a really long stretch of time that he was there, 13 seasons. Obviously went downhill towards the end, but first 10 years he was there, 6 double-digit win seasons, 2 conference championships, Super Bowl appearance. But that's an enticing track record you could fall back on. And in terms of the guys we've seen so far, I'd prefer him over John Robinson, that's for sure. And Robinson shouldn't be written off. He had some early success with the Titans, some really good drafts to start, but a very, very rough finish his last 3 years in the draft. He's also one of the most openly anti-analytics general managers that we've seen out there, which I think is concerning. So out of the guys we've seen so far, I do think Dimitroff is my favorite that I've seen. We'll see who else they bring in, but yeah, like I said, just having that experience and track record of success is something that both with the GMs and the head coaches, I think the Jets are going to prioritize.
Michael, there's no question that this, cycle of hires, this new regime is going to be some of the most important hires that Woody Johnson has, had to make as the owner of this team. So, it's now public. Mike Vrabel, he said it a few times now that he's open to take the Jets job if he approves the GM hire. And Mike Vrabel's obviously viewed as a top candidate for a head coaching job this offseason. Would you be okay if, you get Vrabel as the head coach, he approves of the GM hire, but you have to settle for, a lower tier GM compared to a John Dorsey or Ray Agnew or a, Dimitroff. Would you be okay with that? Are you going to prioritize the head coach here? Or are you going to, try to go after a guy in the front office who you think could, pay off better?
Yeah, that is a really interesting situation because I do like Vrabel as a candidate. In the offseason. Yeah, my mock offseason I made a few weeks ago, he was my pick. I think he checks a lot of the boxes we were just talking about in terms of, a guy with a track record of success who you could bring in and have that floor. I think the floor is really important for the Jets right now because obviously you want to win a Super Bowl. That's the ultimate goal, but it's just at the point where it's been snowballing for so long. You just got to get back to the ground level first and then take it from there. So I think a floor is important, and I really like the floor that he brings. So he's definitely one of my favorite candidates. But at the same time, Do I think he's so great to the point where he should dictate the GM search and, kind of limit your options there? That I'm more skeptical of. I think it will depend on what some of the other head coach options they could bring into the building are, and what they think their chances are with those guys. If Vrabel's far and away the best guy, they love him, maybe they should do it. In terms of getting whatever GM that he would want
Yeah.
to have in the building. But it is interesting because as much as I like him, I don't know if he should be viewed as a guy who is such a high level candidate that he should limit your options at GM, because that's just as important, if not more so, than the head coach, is to nail that hire. So you want to cast a wide net and make sure that you get the best guy there.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree because Vrabel, obviously, he's won the Coach of the Year award. He has a ton of experience as a head coach. He's taken a team to the playoffs, and, I agree with that. I think he's a very solid option, but I don't think he should get to the point where he's really, strongly dictating who you hire as the next general manager. That said, talking about a lot of the positives, the guys that we want to target, Michael, are there any guys that you're looking to steer clear from? I put an article out, obviously, for Jets X Factor not too long ago with my 3 head coaches to avoid. Steve Spagnuolo, Kansas City's defensive coordinator, was at the top of the list because, he obviously had a mess of a tenure with the Rams as his first head coaching job. And again, he's a defensive-minded guy. I also put Clint Kubiak, Saints offensive coordinator, on there. Don't think he has enough experience. Along with Dolphins defensive coordinator Anthony Weaver. Again, same problem with Kubiak. I don't think he has enough experience. Are there any guys in the head coach or GM role that you're going to want to steer clear from this offseason?
The first guy that came to mind for me, and this isn't in a steer clear type of way. I think it's more in the way of saying I'm lower on him than what the hype is. But I think Ben Johnson is a guy who I'm not necessarily
I agree with that.
head over heels for. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't be reasons to be excited about it, or that the Jets shouldn't at least interview him if they can meet his high demands, because he's royalty apparently. But I think that's the aspect of it that kind of bothers me, is like, he's
a coordinator too. Yeah.
Great job, but he's a coordinator of 3 years. He has been very selective with his process as an interviewee, which, good for him. Like, that's a great position that he has over there. And if you're going to leave that, even if it's for a promotion, you want it to be in a good spot. But just like the reports that are coming out, like he wants, he has a checklist of things that he wants. Like, I don't know if that's the guy that you want coming in, especially with this team where we know that there's a lot you got to work through if you're going to make success happen here. I don't know. And he just kind of strikes me as a guy who has the, chops as a coordinator, is a great schemer, designer, all that, but head coach, leader of the locker room material.
Like Vance
I don't know,
Joseph.
because we've seen a lot of good coordinators struggle in recent years, like your Eberfluses and then Matt Nagy before him in Chicago. It doesn't always work. I do feel like the Jets are going to in New York, and Adam Gase before him. So it doesn't always work. So I'm not treating Ben Johnson as the crown jewel of this class just because of the production that's happened under him. He's intriguing, but I wouldn't, the same way with Vrabel. If we're not going to do that for Vrabel, make, special distinctions for him, then definitely not for Ben Johnson, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's some other interesting names to possibly keep an eye on. The coordinators I'd be willing, again, don't get me wrong, Michael, I go experience first no matter what the job is, head coach or GM. I always want someone who has experience as a head coach or general manager. So the coordinators that I'm okay with if the Jets were to hire Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, former Jet, obviously. I think he's a leader of men, and I think, again, he's familiar with the New York market. He knows what it's like to, be a primary figure in the media market. So I like him. Liam Cohen, the Bucs offensive coordinator, if he could get, a good coaching staff around him, I think that could be that could be feasible. But, one more question here, Michael, before we let you go. What are your thoughts on maybe going after a former head coach here? Two names I'm going to throw out here. One who's still in the league, one who's not. The one who's in the league is Cliff Kingsbury, currently serving as the Commanders' offensive coordinator. Spent 4 seasons as the Cardinals head coach, took him to the playoffs, interviewed for the Jets job, in 2019 that Adam Gase eventually landed, and we all know how that went. And my other name I wanted to just throw in there is Frank Reich. He had success with the Colts, obviously, in his first tenure as a head coach, and then really, really struggled with the Panthers. Thoughts on those two names and thoughts on any other former head coaches the Jets could possibly go after?
I mean, Kingsbury is interesting. And the thing about the second-time head coach type of candidate is a lot of times they'll be labeled negatively in this sense of like, okay, they peaked and then they fell off. Why do we want this retread? He's a has-been.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the great coaches in the league are that exact mold, like your Andy Reid's, Pete Carroll when he's with the Seahawks, even Bill Belichick with the Patriots. These are guys who had runs at it first and flopped. And, Andy Reid was very successful with the Eagles, but obviously towards the end, had some failures that led to that ending. But yeah, a lot of the best coaches in the league are guys who had a run at it first and then are now in their second stint and they're doing really well. So I think there's appeal to candidates like that. And Cliff Kingsbury is a guy who, that was an outside the box hire at the time out of college when he went to the Cardinals. He showed a lot of promise. They had a great 2021 season. They built up each year, then it fell off, but he could easily be the next one in that line of head coaches who had their first try at it and then come back after learning a little bit the second time around. Now, one guy who didn't fit this, Jets fans know, Adam Gase. But Adam Gase, he's in his own.
I don't think he was ready. I don't think he was even ready at that time.
I don't. It's unfair to put any coach in the same sentence as Adam Gase.
Yeah.
So I'll give Cliff Kingsbury the benefit of the doubt there. He was a successful college coach, but I think he's fascinating. In terms of Reich, though, I don't know if I feel quite the same because he is already older at this point. Not that rules you out or anything, but it did go really badly in Carolina there to the point that it's concerning to me at this point. And that was a similar situation in terms of obviously different quarterbacks and different kind of trajectories of the roster, but just in the sense that, a franchise that was deep in a hole trying to get out of it, and he couldn't really do it. So I don't know if I'm as high on Reich, but Kingsbury does intrigue me.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Kingsbury, and people have strongly agreed with me that, I'm on board with Kingsbury, and some shut that down right away. No Kingsbury. Reich's an interesting one. He just crossed my mind the other day. I was thinking about potential head coach candidates. He could be someone maybe the Jets interview here these next few weeks because he's not with a team right now. So you could, maybe just get an interview. It can't hurt to interview anyone. So why not give him an interview? But I don't think he's the best fit for the job. I would actually kind of be disappointed if you brought in a guy like Reich. You look how it went with the Panthers starting 1-10 that season. That he was quickly fired. So he hasn't been able to turn around poor teams in his run as a head coach. Obviously, he did great things with the Colts, but that situation was kind of perfect for him from an offensive standpoint. He had all the weapons he really needed to have success. But Michael, really appreciate you joining us. You got any final thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I think by the time, we talk tomorrow, there will probably be another major story out there. So whatever we're talking about today is going to be irrelevant in 48 hours. Jets are very entertaining. Like you have to give them that. There are a lot of bad teams out there that are bad in like this dreary, boring way. But the Jets, like we're always entertained. We're always in the news. I find it fun personally.
Yeah.
Just not compared to teams that win, but as opposed to most other teams that lose.
From a content standpoint too. Like, at least you have something to talk about.
That as well. Like there are reasons to actually be engaged in thinking about the team. So I guess I take solace in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. This team could never stay out of the spotlight. Michael, one final thing here, as a fan of this team. Obviously, you're older than me, but based on where your fandom has aligned, when you first became a Jet fan, I've been wanting to ask you this question: have you ever seen a Jets playoff game as a fan?
So the first full season where I really, I was paying attention in the off season and was ready for the opener was 2011. It was like the 2010 playoffs where I really started to take notice because I wasn't a huge football fan or anything. I was into baseball first.
Okay.
And then 2010 playoffs, I was I think I just caught like I don't know. I was at like some friend's birthday party and they all Jets stuff on. They're all like hyped. And I was like, what's going on? The Jets win today. They're playing in the Super Bowl. And then I watched that game against the
Yeah.
Steelers. Obviously, they lost that. So
Mm.
it's really from the exact point that I started watching that it's all been downhill from there. So you're off the hook. It's not you,
Yeah.
you
Okay. Good
being
to hear.
born.
Yeah.
It precedes that. It's the moment I decided to tune in to the Steelers game in 2010. It all went from there.
Wow, so that's crazy to think we both really well. You've seen a playoff game, but you haven't seen it to the point where you're like the diehard fan that you are
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
So I'm glad to hear I'm not the I'm not the only one who hasn't seen our beloved Jets play a playoff game. But Michael, really appreciate it. Everyone. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you smash that like button and you are subscribed to the channel. Appreciate all the support alongside Jets X Factor's Michael Nania. I am your host Connor DeLong, signing off. JTS Jets.